Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Today, we are going to do a continuation from a few episodes back where we talk about the positive impact that our parents or our families of origin had on our lives. We do a lot of work in personal growth, looking backwards on past trauma and the things that affected us, often negatively. So we wanted to give some more light to the positive stuff as well, which has gone on to form part of who we are. And before we do that, we are going to start with a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast. So for today's practice, let's start by feeling your bum on the chair or your feet on the ground. Let's take a moment to go inward. And I'm going to ask you to feel an object. Pick up an object and hold it in the palm of your hand. So here I have some lip balm. I'm going to put it in the palm of my hand. Just take a moment to feel the shape of it in your palm. Notice the weight, texture, the temperature, whatever details come up that you feel in your body. And with your other hand, I want you to feel this object with the tips of your fingers. Noticing the difference between the sensations in your palm and what you notice with the tips of your fingers. Gee, what are you noticing?
That's so neat. Okay, so I'm holding a little crystal. I often have things that I'm holding in my hand when I'm doing this podcast, when I'm working with clients. It's just something that feels comforting for me, grounding. So I started off like squeezing it tight. I'm like, oh, that's a familiar feeling. It feels good. And then when you said to touch it with my fingertips, it's a little bit different now, but initially when I was doing that, I felt this sort of uncomfortable, flighty sensation in my upper chest, in the front of my body. And I thought that was interesting. I didn't expect that. And so I went back to squeezing it tight, and squeezing it tight for some reason helps me bring energy back down. And I could still feel some of that fluttery feeling, but there was also like this grounded energy that was sort of mixing with it, sort of like if you mix paint colors, and it made it easier, more comfortable to be with that other feeling that was there. So
Neat.
just neat. Yeah. Generally speaking, I like deep pressure with my massages. I like to lift heavy weights. There's something about that, like that muscle tensing, that is very grounding for me. I had to actually learn how to find really gentle, feathery kind of touch soothing and enjoyable. It used to just irritate my nervous system so much. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. So yeah, just neat to notice.
Mm-hmm. I'm very similar. We're often such opposites. And in this case, we're totally similar. I prefer deep, firm touch, and light, skittering touch feels uncomfortable for me. So wonderful things to notice, these subtle differences in our body and in the sensations that feel good for us and that generate some kind of response in our nervous system.
Yeah, I have a funny story around this. Like with my ex-husband, he liked to touch me like just on my arm or whatever, like in a very gentle and fast way. And I was like, please stop. It feels like, please don't pet me like a dog or a cat. It feels horrible. Like I hate that feeling. But beyond that, I didn't understand why. Like I didn't know myself and my body enough at that time that I was much more of a deep pressure person. And I was more just like, don't touch me.
Right.
And it wasn't about not liking touch. It was just that type of touch at that particular stage in my life with my body awareness and body connection. Like it just felt really horrible. And now that kind of touch can feel very nice for me. but I've had to sort of wire it into my system that it can be something that can feel good. And there's certain times where that would feel good. And I would probably need a lot of deep pressure and heavy touch before something light like that can feel nice for me.
What a beautiful discovery. Like, that's, I think, such an important thing, especially for people for whom touch is important. If we've been touched in ways that don't feel good to us, we might think we don't want to be touched. And it might actually be the most nourishing thing if we can come to understand how we want to be touched.
Yeah, and I haven't done enough research on this. I haven't read up enough on it, but like I find it really hard to believe that there's human beings, unless there's a medical issue going on, who don't like touch ultimately, like really truly deeply, or wouldn't benefit from touch. I definitely think there's experiences we could have gone through that make you not feel that touch is comforting or safe. But I always feel so sad when I hear people who say, I don't like touch, I don't like hugs, don't touch me. Because I wonder like how touch deprived they might be. I wonder how they might assume they don't need touch or want touch when really their system really needs it for co-regulation and regulation. And my hope for people is that you find your way back to a safer relationship with touch so that you do discover what you like. And this was a neat lesson I learned from one of my kids because he did not like hugs, or so I thought. But what it was he didn't like hugs in the way I understood hugs. Like he didn't like to just be hugged whenever. Right? Like I love to be hugged whenever. Like if you're a safe person in my life, hug me pretty much anytime. It will feel good for me. But he didn't like that. He liked hugs when they were initiated by him. But also more than hugs, he would seek sensory contact by like pushing me or like slapping my arm. All these things that socially we wouldn't say, oh, that's someone who wants to connect. You actually might sort of give a child a hard time for hitting you or slapping you or like pushing up against you or like running and slamming into you. But that was sort of his sensory system. Those are the things that helped his body feel regulated. And when I understood that more, we could incorporate that into the way we connected. So I knew that at bedtime with my one kid, we could just curl up and snuggle up. And that would feel really comforting for him. With the other kid, it was like he would just shove his hand sort of in my face. And I knew like just shove my hand back up there so that it can sort of have that sort of almost high five, but like a more like even like sturdier contact. And that was his way, like his way of snuggling at night was doing stuff like that. And I didn't understand it at the beginning. But it was so cool when I did. And I could notice the pattern. Like every day, he sort of seeks out contact and connection and physical touch, but in ways that are totally different from his brother, totally different from how I would seek contact, different from the average, typical person. But he still likes contact. He still likes physical touch, just in a very different way.
Sweet. Oh, that's great to know.
I had a friend, or still have a friend, who she was like, I don't like hugs. And we all honored her and didn't cross those boundaries. But I'm such a huggy person. And I show a lot of love and appreciation and joy through hugs and touch. And so we just, I don't know if we made this agreement or I just started doing it. I just would tell her, right now, if you were a hugger, I would be hugging you, just so you know. And I think that there's a sweetness in that too, is like not being afraid to share the root of what's behind that hug, which is like there's affection, there's care, there's, appreciation for you, even though you might not want to receive it in the form of a hug.
Wonderful. Making space for all the different ways. I love that. Those are among the things my parents taught me. Making space for people to be how they are, this kind of open-mindedness that, there's a lot that shocks you when you go out into the world and you realize that things aren't the way that they were at home necessarily, And I think something that I took for granted or I was enraged by as a teenager, are actually these beautiful things that my parents offered, like open-mindedness and a genuine seeking to understand other people's perspectives. You remind me a lot of that when you talk about your kids, really seeking to understand what's going on for them. You do it in this, I think of it as sort of a microscopic, really specific and personal way. And I think part of my universalizing tendencies, you go small and I go giant, overwhelmingly large. I think that also comes from my parents. While they would be seeking to understand what was going on for me, it would also be in a much more universal context of the sorts of things that happen for people, and wondering, getting curious about what might be happening for other people.
What kind of things would your parents say around the home that connected you to that way of being, that curiosity about others?
A lot of imagination feels quite unlimited, chez moi. So I remember as a kid, there was a man who dressed quite unusually who would always run by every morning. He had these pointy black patent leather shoes, and he was kind of stylishly fancy but alternative, and he had a briefcase, and he would run by every morning. And as a child, I referred to him as the stealer. I decided he had stolen something and was running away. And that sort of experience, them laughing about, what I was coming up with, and then coming up with their own thoughts, well, he might be doing this, he might be doing that, or I wonder what that person is up to. The same kind of curiosity that you offer into the world when you look at other people. And of course, as an adult, I realized he was probably running to catch the bus.
But he must have stolen something. And the bus was the
briefcase.
getaway car.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, briefcase full of jewels that he comes and steals every day. Yeah, that kind of thing. And, even now, when I'm talking with my parents about things, people, problems, whatever it might be, especially if I'm having a problem with a person, they're very quick to say, well, that person might be feeling this way or that way, or, helpful contributions that humanize our experience, I think.
What do you think's been the impact of growing that ability from a young age in your life and relationships?
I think it makes me more loving and more understanding. There's this sense that people are the way they are, and that's not bad or wrong. It's just what's happening. It might have some impacts on me that are favorable or undesirable, but it's what's happening, and there's an ability to be with. That I just would have been completely blind to this before. I never would have attributed these truths to my parents, but they're so deeply true. A being with, a taking action, but also being able to let go. So doing all the things you can do to get whatever it is, the result you want, and an ability, a sort of a non-attachment.
Yeah. So neat. As you're talking, I had the realization, I'm like, that's why I feel so good with you. Or one of the reasons. Because I really feel the freedom to just be me. I think if you probably put our lives side by side and how we do things, how we see things, there'd be a lot of differences. But I never feel that those get in the way of anything. They're sort of, I'm me, you're you. We've gone on lots of trips together. I find our trips like super easy and fun, and probably you're one of the easiest people I've ever traveled and gone places with, even though I feel like we're different in how we do things. And I sense it's because of that piece of you're you, you're allowed to be you. I'm me. I like it this way. However you like it is fine. However I like it is fine too. And we'll figure out something that feels good for both of us. And that feels really nice.
It sure does. Yeah. And ditto. Mm-hmm. And that paired with a desire to understand. Like, I think there's a lot that I was very defensive of as a younger person, feeling like my mom was prying and asking questions that were in a needling sort of way, trying to steer the conversation or my life direction, which she certainly is also doing. And underneath that is a deep desire to understand and to be understood. And I love cultivating that now with my mom, this just understanding each other with the allowed to be different factor there.
I think that's so neat is when you are willing to ask people questions and they feel the freedom to answer truthfully without some reaction on our end. You get the opportunity to really get to know someone.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it remind me of? I was going to say something about this piece, but just how much curiosity makes a difference in relationships, right? The ability to stay open, stay curious, and wonder has definitely made my relationships feel really good. And this is something I noticed one time. So I have a bunch of friends. This is back from like high school days. We're still in touch. One of my friends is really curious and she asks a lot of questions and quite detailed, and they're personal questions. But always like, there's always the opportunity to say, no, I don't feel comfortable talking about that or whatever, right? It's not like a forceful thing. But it's very neat because when I'm around her and I engage with her or I listen to how she engages with other people, I connect to, oh, she's being curious. She wants to get to know you, right? And I have another friend, and we're all friends, and some of these friendship groups overlap. One of my friends said, I find her so intrusive. Like, why does she care about all this stuff about my life? Like, and I think she was saying how she found it sort of off-putting and just a little bit like too close for comfort.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting, right? How one person experiences it as someone's curious about me. They want to get to know me. They want to connect with me more deeply. They want to understand me. And someone else views it through the lens of, what are they trying to find out?
Right.
Why do they want to know this about me?
Yeah.
And just neat how the lens that we experience people through, right?
It is neat. Yeah. Yeah. I'm constantly impressed and baffled by how differently we can all view things and process information and feel.
Yeah. And I think with this one person, I don't know if she ever made clear, like, hey, I find your questions a bit too close for comfort, or I'm curious why you ask all the questions. Like, I think it was more like, oh, I think I'm going to pull away instead of engaging. Right. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what it would be like to like bring that to the table and share that experience, because, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to be asked questions, but it'd be neat to understand that more about each other.
For sure. Yeah. Noticing what comes up, what our assumptions are, where we could go with it. There's so much more space in the world than we allow ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. For me, I feel like it's one of my love languages, I think. If I'm curious about you, I want to get to know you, I want to understand you. And so I really enjoy it when people ask me questions. But I've also had to learn how to like sit back and give people the opportunity to ask me questions.
Right.
So it's neat.
I think I have a really hard time interacting with people who are not open to seeking mutual understanding. Just to me, it's like a neato exploration and such a great opportunity for connection. And when I'm faced with like walls or defenses, it feels like so icky and sad and sort of impenetrable. I don't like that feeling.
I find that for me, I've changed over time. Like, I think there was a time in my life in certain types of relationship, maybe they were like more intimate partner relationships, but where I don't know that I was always the best receiver of information. I think old wiring would have got in of like, well, that's weird that you do it that way, because I was still wired up and there's a right and a wrong way to do things, right? That was what I was taught. And as that shifted to we all do things differently and how neat is that? It became more fun to be curious, and I think it became nicer to be able to be honest with me, because my answer was often, wow, that's so neat. I would never have thought to do it that way, or I would never do it that way, but it's so neat to hear that that works for you, and that for that to come from a real genuine place. I don't think that came from that same kind of genuine place in the past. Even if it came out of my mouth, there was probably a part of me thinking, well, that seems like a silly, inefficient way to do things.
Right. Yeah. Judgments. Very familiar to me, judgments. Hey, there's a better way. Hey, there's a more efficient way. There's a way that feels good. Don't you want to try that? Yeah, it can be very intrusive.
Right. I had this thought actually driving maybe last week or something, thinking exactly about this, of how we all have different ways we like to do things, and how my old bar, the old standard was, is it the most efficient? Right. But I also feel like I ran certain tests through that, and other ones I'm like, I just like it this way. Right. Maybe there's a more efficient way, but in my mind, it was just the better way, the best way.
Yeah.
And I sort of ran that mentally through my mind of, do I actually do things in the most efficient way all the time? No, totally not. Do I do things in the way that makes the most sense all the time? Also not. There's certain things I do that way, and also other things that I do because in a certain way, because it just feels nicest for me.
Totally.
Or it's most familiar for me. And that moment was a very humbling moment, because I'm like, yeah, I really want to continue to offer that freedom to everybody else too. Right? As long as you aren't harming someone, who cares how you do it? And that those words would have never come out of my mouth like 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. That's an area specifically where I felt very defended when I was younger. My sense, the pressure that I was putting on myself and what I believed to be true, was that Mum's suggestions, she's very keen on the most efficient and best ways. And she's also wired up for that. If she learns something is good or better, boom, it's done. It will never be done a different way, And her recommendations about how I could and should be doing things, I took to be the final word, and like, I remember accumulating sort of bits of lies of like, yeah, I'm doing the thing. Yeah. I'm going to hear about this for a week. So I'll just say I'm doing the really good thing to make her shut up, And then I realized that it was, again, the root of this seeking to understand. So now when there's a better and more efficient way that I am not interested in doing, I can just say, and I think this is the result of self-knowing and boundaries and knowing how to share yourself. I see that there's a better way and a more efficient way, and this is the way I want to do it. And all of that, her questions disappear. She just goes, oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Simple.
Amazing. Yeah.
I didn't know I could do that. We could have this kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Whereas what would have been the old way of like not doing it and just like getting more and more annoyed inside and reactive.
Yeah. And more pressure feeling and more wanting to avoid and all of that stuff that turns out quite unnecessary for me.
This reminds me of, you and I facilitate a lot of group work, a lot of group calls. And there'll be people who ask, how do I tell my partner that such and such doesn't actually feel good for me because of such and such, and I don't really like it that way? And often our response is, how about exactly like that? And people are like really surprised. They're like, what? I could just say that?
So
Yeah.
simple. Yeah.
You could try that and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's basically what over time you learn to do with your mom, is to be able to say, yes, I hear what you're saying. And no, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Totally.
And that was it.
That's it. Yeah. And it's paired. I mean, the energy behind that has to shift enormously to get to that place, right? I think you hear out in the world a lot about self-love and setting boundaries and things. It's so much gentler and subtler than I had imagined when I began this work. And the challenges, how should I say this thing? It's like when they're talking to us and there's no charge, it's easy and simple. They're like, here's the thing I want. Once you get into communication with this person who you're having this issue with, all of this internal stuff comes up and all of these shoulds and all of these expectations, real or imagined, and then it's getting complicated and suddenly there's stories and reasons and blah, blah, blah. It's too many words. And it just gets confusing. It's a lot simpler.
A lot of us learn that either that it's not safe or welcome to set any boundaries, period, or that boundaries have to be really mean and harsh. And we often hear people say, well, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to make the person feel bad. Right. But when we come back to, not always, but there came a time when I realized this. Boundaries are a byproduct of knowing how I feel and what I need moment to moment, and then just saying it out loud. Yeah. And when I don't put pressure on myself to make the other person understand or make them agree or make them do the thing I want them to do or take it personally if they don't, then a boundary feels kind of simple. And it feels like, this motion, if you're watching us, I do with Steph, and you always think, I don't know what association you make with this, but like, I'm basically like, if I had a trench coat, I'd be like opening up the trench coat, basically saying like, here I am, see me. I'm letting you see me. This is how this feels for me. This is what I need. And it feels that simple, right? I might also feel afraid that you might judge me, but I could also expose that part. This is, and share, like, I feel worried to share this with you because I'm scared you might judge me. And the connection with you really matters to me. Right. And that's
We
it.
make it so personal and so much bigger than it is. I always like to use the example of chocolate because it's simple and it's not loaded for anyone. And it illustrates boundaries. If you prefer chocolate or vanilla and somebody asks you what kind of cake you want, the answer is not going to be loaded. It's going to be simple and clear, right? And that's true of everything else. When we talk about needs and the fear of expressing needs, nobody's afraid of saying, I have to go to the washroom. That's a need. But when it comes to love needs and connection needs, we get all squirrely about everything and it becomes so complicated. I wish for everyone is that they can know themselves simply and come to be able to express it simply as well.
I'm going to say that there are some people, and I probably lived it, where I didn't want you to know that I need to go to the bathroom. I might have known I need to go to the bathroom, but I don't want to interrupt whatever we got going on, or, and I wouldn't speak up for that. Or I remember, like, if you would have asked me, do you like vanilla or chocolate? I probably at some point in my life would have been like, I don't know. And it might not have been because I really didn't know, but because I didn't know what you wanted me to say.
Yeah.
Or I didn't know if you wanted chocolate too. Right. So it's neat to track where you are on that spectrum. Like, do you actually know it's vanilla and you're afraid to say it? Do you actually not have a clue because you've been conditioned to believe that other people know better for you and you don't actually know? Or, do you know, and are you willing to say?
Yeah.
And are you willing to not defend it and justify it and explain why you want vanilla or chocolate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing.
It's a process.
It surely is.
However, what I'd want to say is, and I think this may be to your point, when you're born, unless there's some medical thing going on, you know what you want. When you're a baby, you know you want food, right? You know you want to be picked up, or you know you want comfort, to be comforted, right? Maybe you don't know exactly how that's going to come, but like, you know, right? Babies tell us when their needs are not being met. They don't try to hide, like, oh, I better not cry now because, you know, she doesn't want to hear it. They do eventually learn that, and they actually learn it quite quickly. But initially, when we're born, we don't have all those filters and conditioning. So we're learning to come back to that place of connecting back to knowing how I feel and what I need, and the willingness to let other people see that.
Yeah, for sure. Probably mentioned this before, but I kind of introduced hugs and cuddling to my family.
Yeah.
I remember hugging and kissing my grandma, and she like put up with it and loved it, but it was very unfamiliar, we could tell. And my mom told me a story once of when I was a baby in my pram, and mom got up to fuss with me, and grandma said, "Leave the baby alone." And mom was like, "I'm not going to leave the baby alone. Like, I want to fuss with the baby." And it felt good hearing the story. I'm like, I desire to be fussed with. I'm glad that you fussed with me. Thank you. And then I realized, oh, if grandma was suggesting that I not be fussed with, she probably was not fussing with my mother, who might desire deeply to be fussed with. And so I said, like, "Did you get no snuggles?" And she said, "No." It's like, "I'm going to snuggle you to death right now. We're going to snuggle till you tell me to stop." And that was so nice. She was into it. What a nice
She was
feeling.
into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes me so sad when I think about how many generations went without snuggling and touch.
Yeah.
Because they believed at the time that was what was better.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Our capacities are changing collectively, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
There's two other things. Okay, wait, let me look at my list. Okay, tenacity. So my mom's name is Dorothy. My dad calls her Tenacious D. If you're not familiar with the band, go look it up. Love me some Tenacious D. And she is like a dog on a bone. She will not let a thing go till she understands or moves through, you know? And as I said earlier, that understanding can come in the form of just, this is how I feel, end point, you know? And she goes, "Oh, well, you can't argue with feelings. There you go." One of the ways that this tenacity comes out in a really practical way that I've absorbed without realizing was getting what you need from people and customer service representatives. Mom has this amazing way of being firm but friendly. The example that I have is with TELUS, the phone company here. She phones them every once in a while and just says, "Well, I've been a client for a long time, and I feel that I'm deserving a discount." And inevitably, the customer service person is sort of flabbergasted and befuddled and says, "Oh, we don't do that. What do you mean?" And she just persists until finally someone is going to push her up the ladder to someone who can help her. I sort of imagine maybe they just want this phone call to be done, so they just do something. They just give her what she wants. But also it's because she's pleasant. Nobody's blocking her progress because she's pleasant and persistent, And I've found that I have a real ease with customer service people where I find they end up wanting to help me. And I think that's pretty huge, especially in real estate. It's like the foundation for a win-win-win situation for all parties. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's such a neat thing to have in your bones, as this is something acceptable and okay to do. Because when I hear you say that, it brings back all the memories of like being a family in an immigrant family, a child in an immigrant family. And my mom would want to like bargain with all the cash register people. And I was mortified. And I'm like, you're not supposed to do that. Like, you just go pay what it says. She's like, "Well, you never know if you don't ask. Why not ask?"
Yeah.
And yeah, it just mortified me. And, and the idea of doing that, what your mom does, I'm like, I just can't bring myself to do that.
Yeah.
And it actually touches on, I think, a norm in Western culture. I don't know if it's the same in Eastern cultures, but of like negotiating your salary and your pay and stuff.
Mm.
Like, I understand, I guess, how it works. But in my mind, and this is like maybe the naive, idealistic part of me, I'm like, wouldn't it be nice to work with people who just valued you for what you contribute and without you even having to ask, said, I want to pay you well. I want to make sure you're compensated well. I value your work. Can't we live in that world? I don't understand.
Many complicated financial and economic systems. Yeah. There's a lot. That'd be nice. Yeah.
And although that attitude doesn't maybe always get me the discount or, all this extra pay, I don't know. There's a part of me that really likes that part of me,
Mm.
that I think that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? That when I, was managing a team of people, like I led from that place of I want you to feel, even though I can't control how much money you make, I'm not the one paying you, but I'm definitely going to let you know what I value about your contribution. It's like, why can't we live in that kind of world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my parents are good at showing appreciation as well, which I think has formed that part of me.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've spoken before about finding information and asking questions. And what your formative experience was with that. And I think I was really blessed with parents who have a lot of information and are open to not having that information and then seeking it out, without judgment and with genuine curiosity and interest. That's nice.
Mm-hmm. How does that show up in your life? How do you use that skill, that trait?
So no questions are stupid. I feel that genuinely deeply. And I notice when other people are feeling stupid that they have a question, and I'm very quick to jump in and just ask the question I know they have to save them feeling stupid, And I think a curiosity, like I think there's so much of my curiosity that I shut off as a younger person because I felt like it was needling or powerless in some way. I'm not sure quite what I'm getting at with that. It's a sensation that's hard to describe. So I now think it's a very powerful thing to be curious and to seek out information. I think growing my capacity for that, I think, was also a thing because I was so turned off by it because of my defensiveness as a younger person. I've had to regrow my capacity for curiosity and interest, especially that feeling of burden by there is a more effective or a better way. That's debilitating for many people, and I was certainly no exception. So increasing my capacity to hold those things and to not necessarily do things in the best way. Like there's just going to be times where you don't have the capacity to do the best and most efficient thing, and letting that be okay instead of shutting down, I think, is something I've leaned into.
I like that freedom.
Of life. Yeah. In seasons of life, you're going to have different capacities as well, and my mom is retired with a husband and, they have a lovely life. And so her capacity is going to be very different than mine at this stage of life. And I think allowing space for that for myself has been really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Matching our expectations of ourselves to our capacity. I didn't understand that for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm curious about I'm curious about being curious. I'm curious about, have you noticed that there's areas of your life where somebody could be curious about them, and there's certain areas where you're like open and it doesn't evoke anything in you, and other areas of your life that maybe you don't feel so secure in or solid in, where they could bring just the same kind of curiosity, and there's a different body sensation when you hear those questions, or there's a different mind loop that goes on when someone brings their curiosity around different certain areas of your life. Do you notice that?
For sure. I think the mode of questioning will really matter in that way for me. And like the style and tone. Generally, I'm very happy to answer questions, and that feeling of somebody wanting to know me, I'm an open book, you know. If it feels like there's an angle, I'm going to put up some defenses, and
Yeah.
those mostly take the form of like, what are we getting at here? Like, what is this? And then once I understand, I might be open again for sure. But yeah, probably any area of my life where I feel like I could or should be doing better or more, I'm going to feel more defended about than other areas of life where I'm feeling more in flow or whatever it is.
I think that's a good thing to notice, right? When you receive people's curiosity, which areas of your life does it feel pretty okay and pleasant to receive someone's curiosity, and which areas of your life do you notice, oh, this feels more prickly when they ask about that? It gives us good information.
Yes.
This reminds me of conversations with my kid, and I have raised or been blessed with, or whatever, a combination of the two, a very curious child. And I notice his questions, and sometimes when they're around a decision I've made as a mom, I can feel a little bit of when it's still neutral and I'm just answering the question, and I can feel when the inside starts shifting me towards defensiveness and feeling like I have to justify my parenting decision. Right? And it's really neat to notice that, because I think if I didn't notice that, I could just become reactive or shut down or whatever. But I notice it now. I notice the difference in how my body feels when I'm just open to questions and when I'm starting to get defensive and when I feel like I have to justify. And that's my sign to really listen more closely to his question, and also listen beneath the question. To be able to say, are you really feeling that that's not fair? You know?
Right.
And then the tears will come, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know what? Like, the angle you're taking, like where you're taking this conversation, I get it. It actually makes sense what you're saying. And today I'm saying no to it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a neat reminder. The body for me is a neat reminder of when I'm starting to shift into defensive mode. And I know that I don't want to live in that place in my interactions with people. And it's a good cue for me to really listen a little bit more closely to what the person's actually saying, instead of all the stuff it triggers up in me. Right? Because
That's huge.
often when I listen to what he's actually saying, he has a point and it makes a lot of sense. But that's just not the way we're doing it today. Right? Or he isn't fully able to articulate his upset about it, and it's coming in the form of 15 questions.
Right.
And if I just engage with him at that surface level of questions and feel like he's battering me with questions, I miss the whole point, which is, you feel that that's really unfair. You're really sad that that's just the decision we made. But when I go to that place, then he can express the feeling and I can support him and be with him through that, instead of just getting into a back and forth about answering questions when that's not actually what the conversation is about.
Yeah. What a powerful growing of the pause you have done in your life, to be able to pause in those moments and feel all of that and work your way around it to get to the meat of the issue.
It's been really neat to watch it progress over the years. Like, it took time, it took practice. I remember I was just talking about this the other night, actually. There was a time when my kids were younger where all of a sudden I noticed one day my internal voice sort of sounded a bit monstery, like it wasn't very nice.
Mm.
And on the odd occasion, it actually came out as my outside voice, like I would actually say the things. And I was aware enough at the time to be like, ooh, that wasn't a very nice thing to say. But I couldn't connect to the caring part enough to not say it or to repair it immediately. But what I started noticing over time is it's connected to my hormonal cycle. Like certain
Mm.
times in my month where I was just like irritable and like my tone and the words, like over simple everyday things that would happen with kids. I just couldn't be with it in the same way. I couldn't be as mellow and chill about it. That was years ago. And I would just say the things that were not that nice. They weren't like horrible, but they weren't necessary. They weren't helpful. They didn't help anyone feel better, except they helped me in the moment feel better in the sense that that huge charge of energy in me got to like come out in the form of not so nice words.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to last Friday. I'm meant to bring my kids' hockey bag to the arena. It's freezing cold outside. I have to carry all these things down the elevator. And so I'm like, I better put on my coat so I don't have to carry my coat also. And I hate being hot. When I'm hot, I'm grumpy. And so I'm wearing this huge, like, down-filled coat. I'm carrying my thermos. I'm carrying 2 hockey sticks and a gigantic hockey bag. And I could just hear myself in my mind, like cursing everybody, cursing my child, cursing hockey. And then I like paused and I started laughing at myself. I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, why am I so upset with my child that he's not actually here to bring his own stuff down when he's just playing basketball with his friends at the arena early, and I'm bringing his gear so that he is on time for warm up. And I thought any other day or week, this would have been no big deal.
Right.
And also, it's sort of my own issue that I chose to wear this coat and now I'm freaking hot and super grumpy. It has nothing to do with my kid. If my kid was here, he would be carrying his bag and we'd trot along and have a nice chat and everything would be fine. So in my mind, I was like, what is happening here? And I just knew, oh, it's the time in my cycle where I'm more irritable. So just keep that in check today.
Mm-hmm.
Because your mind left unattended is going to go to all these not great places.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think growing the pause has helped me be able to do, is to like notice in the moment, this is not my usual self. Something is up. And also not much needs to be tended to. Like this is more just my mind wants to make a big deal out of things that are not a big deal right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The degree to which that can happen and how quickly and how creative our minds are, just I'm always floored by. If you had been in that same experience at the same time in your cycle, but you weren't too warm, it might not have set you off as much, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I remember riding my bike down the seawall one time and I went through a cloud of smell, which reminded me, it put me back immediately at a friend's apartment when I was 14 years old, and there were certain social things happening at that time. And it made me feel like simultaneously really fond, nostalgic memories, and then some like irritation and sadness that came up with that. And like if someone had interacted with me in some snarky way at that moment, I would have snarked back as a result of having experienced a smell for a nanosecond in passing. You know, like this is how quickly our minds operate. And so slowing down and noticing that is obviously very powerful.
Yeah, and having that awareness to know, oh, I'm in a snarky mood, so take that into account, or you just have enough awareness that you can let the person know, you know, or at least, anyways, just the more information you have, the more you can do with it, right? If you choose to. And I think you being being able to notice that all of a sudden you've jumped into snarky, me being able to notice all of a sudden I feel like a volcano inside. It was very clear to me, like in body and mind, that I had turned into the monster. And I say monster like very endearingly, but like it was clear because I actually have a lot of experience now feeling peace in my body and calmness and clarity in my mind that I notice shifts much more quickly. And I can catch it and be like, what's this? It's starting to feel different. This is not how I usually feel. But past decades, I'm always used to feeling stressed without thinking I was stressed. I was always feeling overwhelmed and rushed and a little bit already on high alert and a little bit sort of on the edge. So it would have been harder to notice when you're already on the edge. It's harder to notice when you're like gone up another level. It all sort of feels the same, right? So it's harder to notice, oh, I'm at that place. It might be good to like chill out a little bit and like lower some expectations or give myself a break or just be aware that things that come out of my mouth might not be that nice. And maybe I want to consider whether I say them or not. But now it's so clear and obvious when I'm in that place.
Yeah.
I almost stop in my tracks. I'm like, who have I become? What just happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's nice to be able to laugh at it. Like, it's not a big deal. I'm not a terrible person. Right? But I can choose more intentionally about what to do next.
Yeah. Priming the body for peace is thusly the name of our program. We were primed for stress. And you have to prime for peace if you want to be able to experience what that is and notice these subtle shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got so many tools at our disposal to notice when things are off. A pattern shifts in our lives, especially something like communication with someone you're dating. The second, we start establishing these patterns unconsciously, we start noticing patterns outside of ourselves. And the moment there's even the tiniest shift, we're on high alert. Imagine having that sensation also for there being a shift in the peaceful feelings in your body. That's a gift.
Yeah, and that's probably the most important shifts to notice is your own versus tracking someone else's. But a lot of us grew up where even as young children and babies, they've done research on this. Babies are always tracking, right? Humans are always tracking. Am I safe? Do I matter? We start adjusting our behavior to like ensure highest level of survival rate. So it makes sense to be hyper vigilant and really tracking someone's behavior and then making some assessment about whether you think you're safe or not. But it's exhausting. And it's not actually the thing that creates safety.
Yeah.
And so turning the energy back towards ourselves, learning, when am I at a peaceful, easeful state? When do I shift out of it? What helps me shift out of it?
Yeah. Just what you were describing earlier about babies, knowing exactly what they need, expressing exactly what they need. They're a very self-contained being in that moment, needing to learn how to operate with the world outside themselves. And it makes so much sense to be tracking and to starting to notice patterns. And as we become self-sufficient-ish adults, to go back inward and discover what's inside and to give less attention to tracking what's outside ourselves and learning to track what's inside. It seems very important to me.
Track what's inside, share what's inside. The people who are meant for you want to know what's inside and they want to work with you. And then, when you share what's inside with people and you notice they're not interested, they can't be with what you have to share, then it's a good sign that they might not be aligned for you. Yeah. And that's really good to know.
Yeah. So simple. I didn't think my parents were aligned with me as a younger person. And now I see that we're so aligned, it's almost hard to fathom. And what a nice thing that is. Yeah.
Neat. Really neat.
There's a couple more things. I think we should wrap it up quickly, but I wanted to say humor and taste in music. And film, probably, I guess. Remember when I was 12, they said, finally, you're old enough that we can show you the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And for those who haven't seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show,
I have not seen it.
it's a cult classic musical with like transvestites from outer space and dancing, cannibalism. Like, it's an eclectic mix of wonder and unusualness with a bit of sexiness also. And that's, I think, speaks volumes to what I like now, and I think how aligned we are. I love their taste in music. I love when I wake up at their house, there's often music playing upstairs, and you open the door and you can hear a tiny bit, and then you go upstairs and you open the other door and then there's the music. And it's the music of my childhood. I hear things now out in the world that bring me right back to my childhood living room when I was a kid. My dad was playing a Supertramp record or something like that. And it makes me think of how formative that is for us, what we want to consume, listen to, see. And interesting to notice sort of what feels good for people as well. I often thought those were the ways, they were the only ways. This is the music. These are the movies. This is the style of furniture. And jarring and wonderful to discover other options out in the world. And then neat to see how that folds in with other people's lives. The style of furniture, I think, is a huge thing for people. What feels comfortable in a home. And the differences there is really neat to discover.
I think it's really special that you share that connection with your parents, humor and music. Hearing you say that, I noticed like a little pang of jealousy because that's not how our family connects, right? I can't tell you what my parents think is funny, and they would have no clue what I think is funny. It's just not a way that we connected. We didn't connect that way with each other. And in terms of music, our connection would have been the music they played when I was a young child, like Chinese music that would probably bring me back nostalgically, but we don't connect. Like, I have no idea what they listen to now. They have no idea what I listen to. But so it was neat to notice what came up for me hearing you speak about that. And then it was neat because all of a sudden what popped into my mind is we connect over food. And maybe like a week ago, I had seen some reel, and it was like recreating this like childhood dish or similar to what my mom would have made for us growing up. And I was so excited to make it. I was so excited to eat it. And then when it turned out really well, I was like super excited. And I took a picture and I sent it to my parents, and they were super excited. And they're like, oh, like that looks so good. And like, will you make it for us sometime? And this moment, like sharing with you, hearing what you connect with your parents, made me notice where I don't connect with my parents and where I could bring more connection if I wanted to. It also helped me appreciate the way we do connect. And I think we're going to do another episode about comparison, but it's neat to notice how we compare. And it's also neat to see that you might not connect with everybody in the same way that other people connect with people, but you probably have your way. And to notice, what is your way? And your way of connecting with each person or each group of people is probably different. And can you let yourself enjoy that a little bit more enjoying the special way you connect with the people in your life?
Yeah, all those connections are instruments in the symphony of life, right? I talk about that a lot, that we all have our role to play, and it's so easy to compare and feel jealous, and really that highlights a desire for love and connection. And the love and connection we do have is special in its own way that might not look like somebody else's way, or sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. And all of that is necessary and true. It's beautiful to be able to interact with.
I wonder if I sent a cat video to my mom, whether she would laugh, whether she would think it was funny.
Yeah, there are definitely some things I want to share with my parents that they don't find funny. And I'm like, oh, come on. It's funny. Okay. We're at an hour. Let's shut her down.
Okay.
How are you feeling? Is there anything else you want to say about positive parental influence before we close?
I would say just notice whether you have capacity to bring curiosity to what you feel is a positive parental influence. And also notice if you don't. And if you don't, that's okay. You might not be at that place yet. And if you're not at that place yet, to encourage you to bring curiosity to what needs to shift for you. What kind of support do you need? What kind of feeling or expressing or grieving is necessary for you to start moving towards that direction of having more capacity to see what some of the positive influences are, if that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gigi.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Do you have a closing practice in mind?
I am touching my feet. I am a big feet toucher. And some years ago, I was doing a program with Elia Marak. I love Elia. And he reminded me of how important it is to touch our feet every day. And so if you are either a feet toucher like me, I encourage you to do that. And if you are not yet a feet toucher, just the invitation to give your feet some touch and see what feels good. All of our nerve endings are down in the feet, as I'm told by my dad. And it's important to nurture the feet. Right? And if you can't just grab your feet right now, can you just smush them into the ground or smush them into your shoe or wiggle your toes and feel your sock and just bring some sensation awareness to your feet.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I moisturize my feet with coconut oil after every shower. And then I put on some socks to keep the moisture in. And it always feels good to give my feet some attention. They provide so much for us, our feet, if you have feet.
They do.
And giving them some love and appreciation. It's a very connecting activity, very self-honoring gratitude.
Yeah, I've been in the practice and it felt a bit awkward initially, but where you use your fingers to interlock between your toes, sort of like if you were holding hands with someone, and then just rotating, making circles. And I feel the palm of my hand on the ball of my foot, and that's sort of the anchor point. And then from there I can rotate. And initially it felt very awkward. There wasn't that much mobility in my toes or my foot, but now it's become something that feels so soothing to me. And I think I'm sure there's science behind it. It's, those shoes that people wear that separate each of their toes.
Yes.
There's something behind that as well. Yeah. But I think for each toe to get a little bit of love can't hurt your life, whatever the scientific reason is. My guess is it can't bring harm to your life. Indeed. To give your toes and feet some love.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm giving my toes much love right now, wiggling in between. Yeah.
Good.
Thanks, Gigi. Okay. Well, as always, please like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.